Vermont. June 2014. A small-town lawyer opens a manila envelope that had been sitting in a filing cabinet for 3 years. Inside it, a handwritten will, a stack of stock certificates, and a number that made him read the page twice. The man who had filed this will was a former gas station attendant and hospital janitor. He drove a used car. He wore flannel shirts he bought second-hand. He had no office, no degree, no investment portfolio anyone in town had ever heard about. And yet, when the lawyer finished reading, he realized this man had quietly accumulated nearly $8 million. Nobody had seen it coming. That's the part one find most fascinating, not the number, but the invisibility of it. My name is Henry, and this is what I do at Henry Wealth Blueprint. I go looking for the cases that don't fit the story we've been told about money, the ones where the math doesn't line up with the narrative. Because the narrative most of us inherited goes something like this: you earn big, you keep big. High income equals wealth accumulation. It's so deeply embedded in how we think about success that when a case like this surfaces, people call it a miracle, or an anomaly, or luck. I call it a pattern. And patterns, unlike miracles, can be studied. Before we go deeper into this investigation, I want to ask you something. If the story I just described is making you curious, not just about this man, but about what it might mean for your own financial life, subscribe to Henry Wealth Blueprint. I publish these kinds of investigations every single week, and the case files only get stranger from here. Back to Vermont. The man's name was Ronald Red. He worked as a janitor at a hospital and before that, at a gas station, for the better part of 5 decades. He reportedly never earned more than a modest hourly wage. He mended his own coat with a safety pin. He parked far from his destination to avoid paying for parking. To anyone watching, Ronald Red was simply a frugal old man living quietly in a small New England town. But here's the first clue in this investigation: Ronald Reed was not just saving money. He was doing something with it that most financial commentators still underestimate. He was buying shares in companies he understood, utilities, railroads, consumer brands, and then doing almost nothing with them. He held. For decades. He let compounding do what compounding does when you give it enough runway, which is something most people never do because the waiting becomes unbearable. Hold that clue. Because Ronald Reed doesn't become fully legible until you place him beside someone else. Boston. Late 1990s. A software engineer is pulling in a salary in the upper 5 figures, climbing eventually into 6. He has the income Ronald Reed never had. He also has the lifestyle to match. The apartment in the city. The car upgraded every 3 years. The vacations that go on credit because the bonus is always coming. By the time his 40s arrive, his net worth, on paper, is almost nothing. He earns well. He keeps little. His money moves fast, and always outward. I've met versions of this man dozens of times. I've been a version of this man, not at that income level, but in that dynamic, where money comes in and life expands to consume it, as if wealth and lifestyle were the same thing. They are not. And that distinction is at the center of this entire investigation. Here is the principle hiding inside both of these stories. Income is a rate. Wealth is a gap. Specifically, it's the gap between what comes in and what goes out, and more critically, what you do with what stays. Ronald Red understood this perhaps instinctively, or perhaps in the way people who grew up without abundance often do. The engineer had never been taught to think in gaps. He'd been taught to think in ceilings. How high can I earn? Rather than in reserves, how much am I actually keeping and putting to work? Behavioral finance researchers have a name for what the engineer was experiencing. They call it lifestyle inflation, or in some literature, the hedonic treadmill. As income grows, your reference point for normal shifts upward. The apartment that felt luxurious at 28 feels modest at 35. The car that seemed like an upgrade at 30 becomes the baseline at 38. And because the new normal always feels justified, you worked for it, you earned it, the gap never widens. In fact, for many high earners, the gap closes entirely. Ronald Reed had no treadmill to step onto. But here's what I find genuinely compelling about his case. The thing that never gets said loudly enough, his approach wasn't about deprivation. It was about indifference. He wasn't torturing himself to save. He simply didn't want what the culture was selling. That is a psychological profile that is extraordinarily rare and extraordinarily powerful. Contentment, inside a consumer economy, functions like a financial superpower. Now I want to bring in a third figure in this investigation, and I'm going to keep her nameless for another 90 seconds. Because the reveal only lands if you understand the mechanism first. The mechanism is this: compounding is not primarily a mathematical phenomenon. It is primarily a behavioral one. The math is well documented and simple. The behavior required to benefit from it, patience, consistency, the willingness to not react, the ability to sit with uncertainty for years and sometimes decades, is among the hardest things a human being can do with money. We are wired, at a very deep neurological level, for immediacy. We feel loss more acutely than an equivalent gain. We overweight the present and discount the future. Every one of these tendencies works directly against the engine that built Ronald Reed's $8 million. Which brings us to the third figure. Her name was Grace Groner. She worked as a secretary at Abbott Laboratories for most of her adult life. In 1935, she bought 3 shares of Abbott stock for just over $180. She never sold. She never added in any dramatic fashion. She reinvested her dividends quietly, year after year, decade after decade. When she died in 2010, those 3 shares had grown, through splits, reinvestments, and time, into more than $7 million, which she left entirely to a foundation for student scholarships. A secretary. 3 shares. 75 years of doing almost nothing. What Grace Groner and Ronald Reed share is not a secret strategy. There is no hidden knowledge here, no intelligence the wealthy are quietly protecting from everyone else. What they share is a behavioral architecture that most people in modern culture are actively working against. They did not confuse income with wealth. They did not mistake the appearance of prosperity for the fact of it. They understood, at a gut level, that time in the market without interruption is one of the most reliable wealth-building mechanisms ever documented, and they had the psychological constitution to let it run. I've spent years studying these patterns at Henry Wealth Blueprint, and I want to be honest with you, this isn't easy to replicate. Not because the strategy is complicated, but because the culture surrounding you is constantly pulling in the opposite direction. Every advertisement, every social feed, every casual conversation about someone's renovation or new car is a quiet argument for closing the gap, for spending the reserve, for moving money outward rather than letting it accumulate inward. The investigation, then, ends not with a secret but with a mirror. The question this case file forces you to ask is not how do I earn more? It is, what is my gap, and what am I doing with it? What would I need to be genuinely indifferent to in order to give compounding enough runway to work? Those are uncomfortable questions. They require looking at your lifestyle not as a reward you've earned, but as a variable you control. They require accepting that net worth is built in the space between earning and spending, and that space is a choice. If you're tracking these patterns with me, drop the word blueprints in the comments below. It's a small signal that tells the algorithm to keep this case open for others who need to find it. And subscribe, because the case I'm opening next is even stranger than this one.